So we are doing the Q&A. Once again, thank you to everybody that participated and submitted questions on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, all that stuff. I really appreciate it. Got a lot of questions, so I'm going to do my best to answer them as thoroughly as I can. All right, so before I get into questions, I'm just going to do a quick little introduction. For those of you that don't know me personally, give you a little bit of background about just me and how I came up with the name Frankenstein. So I'm a hip-hop artist, rapper from Denver, Colorado, born and raised. Moved out here to Daytona, Florida about a year ago as of last August. As far as music goes, I believe I got started making music seriously, like recording it, releasing it, performing as early as 2011 with some of my buddies. It's been kind of a complicated up and down road ever since then, but like any artist will tell you, that's kind of the nature of the craft. So as far as my name and where I got Frankenstein from, it's kind of it has a bunch of different meanings, but the short story is I've had a bunch of different rapper names before that I thought were cool that I planned on using. But years ago, my cousin that was visiting from out of town, we were hanging out, and just jokingly he was like, yo, you should use Frankenstein as your rap name. And we kind of laughed about it, and I didn't really take it seriously at the time, but it was always kind of in the back of my mind. And then sometime after, when I was like, you know what, I just wasn't feeling any of the names that I had used, and I was inspired by a lot of my favorite rappers and artists that use their real names but kind of put a little twist on it artistically and use that as their stage name or their artist name. That's kind of what I wanted to do. So I was like, you know what, I am gonna go with Frankenstein. But the way that it's spelled, I wanted to do it in a way where it kind of looked like Frank obviously being my first name, and then using N as kind of like a middle initial, and then changing the spelling of Styne and using that sort of as like a last name. So that's how I got the name Frankenstein. But also it's an homage to the original Mary Shelley horror story, Dr. Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster, which that in itself has a whole bunch of different meanings to me personally as far as why Frankenstein and what that means. Short explanation is, Frankenstein being a monster or a misunderstood being comprised of different body parts and organs and things of that nature. I took it and used it in more of an artistic meaning, like being comprised of all the different interests I have and artistic influences, whether it be different genres of music or whether it just be different forms of art like media, movies, television, music, video games, comics, cartoons, whatever. Just putting all those different things together and it creating who I am as a person and just as an artist. So that's kind of the backstory of the name Frankenstein. Once again, thank you to everybody that submitted questions. So I actually got a ton of questions from people curious about who I was inspired by or what artists inspired me or what artists I'm influenced by. So that is a great question. Thank you to all those who asked. It's very difficult to pin it down to just one or two or three. So I'm just going to name off a few kind of honorary mentions, and then, I'll go over a couple that are probably my main source of inspiration. So if I'm just doing strictly hip hop specifically, obviously I would have to go Nas, Eminem, 50 Cent, Tech Nine, Pete Rock, CL Smooth, Wu-Tang, Jay-Z, of course, the list goes on. But as far as like stuff outside of hip hop, I listen to all different genres of music. I don't know, some of you may not know, I'm a big country western fan. So, I'm a big Tim McGraw fan, Midland, Florida Georgia Line, even some old stuff like Charlie Daniels Band, just to name a few off the top of my head. Even a great female country artist like Shania Twain and Faith Hill. Also, I'm a big reggae fan, so Bob Marley, stuff like that. Also just a classic rock fan, so everything from Beatles to Pink Floyd, Zeppelin, AC/DC, Metallica, Sabbath, all the OG like heavy metal bands. To I'm a big 80s fan as far as music and hip hop goes, the golden age of hip hop, but like a lot of the new wave sort of like alternative synthy 80s bands like Depeche Mode and The Cure and Flock of Seagulls. You know, I pull inspiration from all over the place as far as artists goes. And then as far as like newer heavy metal stuff goes, you know, I'm a big Deftones fan, Korn, Linkin Park, Bring Me the Horizon, even like some, you know, more punk rock, if you want to call it that, the older stuff like The Clash and Sex Pistols, to the newer stuff like Blink-182. I grew up on Fall Out Boy, 30 Seconds to Mars. That's not really punk, but a bunch of different artists have influenced me for sure. But if I'm picking like some, you know, main ones that I pull from inspiration, I did choose 3 that I wanted to kind of put a little more shine on. So first of all, as far as like hip hop goes, I had to go with Rakim, mainly because, you know, him being a OG, especially from the golden age era of hip hop. When I really think about it, a lot of my favorite rappers and hip hop artists, their favorite rapper is Rakim. You know, a lot of them get their style from him. He's like a pioneer when it comes to obviously like the multi-syllable rhyming and, you know, putting the knowledge and the science into hip hop and rap, if you know where that comes from. And, you know, me specifically, as far as Rakim goes, I can relate a lot to Rakim because his style is a lot more reserved, a lot more subdued, in contrast to like a Busta Rhymes or like a ODB or even like a, you know, old Eminem or like Onyx and stuff like that are a lot more kind of in your face, loud and rambunctious. Rakim's style is a lot more laid back and more kind of like, you know, smooth. To me, as a naturally like introverted person, that influences my style, I guess, a lot. So actually I have a record called Only You. If you listen to it, if you're a Rakim fan, you'll hear a lot of Rakim influence in that record in particular. As far as hip hop goes, I definitely have to credit Rakim. Another artist I'd have to say for sure, Rob Zombie. For a multitude of reasons, but kind of like, you know, what I said earlier, growing up a kid of just American pop culture in general, and television and film and comics and sci-fi and horror, being able to learn so much about Rob Zombie and sort of his upbringing and childhood and the things that he was interested in that eventually influenced his creativity as a musician and as an artist. I relate to that a lot, being able to pull from just different mediums of media and sort of channeling it into our self-expression and artistry. But also just from a musical standpoint, I'd have to say Rob Zombie, just because what he does as far as putting on a show. Unfortunately, I've never been able to see Rob Zombie live. I would really love to, but from the footage I've seen and videos and stuff like that, you know, I feel like he's one of those artists that really escalated, you know, what it means to go and see an artist perform live, just as far as stage presence and these big productions, and, you know, you're really getting your money's worth when you go and see an artist live, you know, versus just going to a show and it's just a band playing or a rapper standing up there, you know, just doing the songs. Like, that's cool and all, don't get me wrong, but as far as like putting on a big sort of stage production, you know, Rob Zombie I feel like is like one of the greatest to ever do that. Just also, I mean, you know, from a songwriting standpoint, even though a lot of his music might seem kind of simplistic or a lot of the same kind of stuff, I like a lot of technical stuff that he does as far as like layering your vocals and kind of building out a song and using samples and just a bunch of different stuff that I have to credit his influence. I definitely draw from that for sure. So, and then another artist I'd have to really credit a lot of inspiration to, Phil Collins. I've been listening to Phil Collins ever since I was a kid. My dad played a lot of Phil Collins. He was a big Genesis fan and Phil Collins fan, still is. But, you know, as a kid, just riding around in my dad's truck, Phil Collins and Genesis, that music was always just in rotation. You know, it was kind of like the soundtrack to my childhood. I remember being a kid and seeing, you know, bands or musicians or singers or whatever as just purely that. It wasn't until I think I saw, you know, Tarzan when I learned that Phil Collins was doing the music for these big Disney production movies that I was really kind of like, oh wow, you know, that's so crazy that you can be an artist or a musician or a band or whatever, and you know, your music can elevate to a new sort of plane, you know, as far as like being impactful, you know, in film or television or whatever. And that's also another reason why I love Rob Zombie so much, because in the early days, you know, he was directing a lot of his own music videos, and then once he made that transition into film, you could see a lot of the stuff he was influenced by growing up as a kid or whatever. You could see that in his films, and you could see a lot of his own personal sort of signature. He created his own sort of signature style in whatever he was doing, whether it was a music video or a feature film. So going back to Phil Collins, once I started seeing that relationship of being a musician, but your music having a bigger impact when it's in a film or paired with, you know, being on the soundtrack to a movie and stuff like that, it really kind of changed how I looked at the art form of music and its possibilities and the potential and the opportunities. But also, like I said, in a musical sense, I'm a big Phil Collins fan just because, again, his songwriting, the melodies he chooses. Being a drummer, you know, he's very rhythmic in his songwriting, and obviously being a hip-hop artist and a rapper, there's a lot of rhythm and percussion and syncopated rhythms, you know, in hip-hop music and in rap music. So I feel like as a drummer, Phil Collins, especially in the 80s and the 90s, was very tapped into that, very attuned to that. And I think that's why a lot of hip-hop artists and rappers have actually sampled a lot of Phil Collins records for that reason. But also just as far as Phil Collins goes, again, just the way he builds a song, the way he fills it out and layers his vocals, and the way he's able to create all these different parts in a song that make it so moving, you know. He's just an incredible songwriter. So yeah, I got to give it up to Phil Collins for sure. But great question for those that asked about my influences. Thank you. All right, so on to the next question. Do I still train in Muay Thai kickboxing? That is a great question. So for those of you that might not know, I trained in Muay Thai kickboxing for several years. I started training in about 2018, and I kept up with it pretty consistently as recent as 2023. So martial arts, you know, is a huge part of my life. It's done so many things for me that I'm so grateful for, as far as helping me mentally, spiritually, physically. I cannot praise martial arts enough. Choosing to pursue that is probably one of the best decisions I've made in life. I encourage everyone to, if you're a little skeptical or intimidated by trying something like that, you know, I definitely encourage you to just give it a try, even if it's like maybe jujitsu or something like that, or if you have kids that are maybe interested and have asked about it. I think martial arts is a great outlet just to help people be more disciplined and be more mindful, and just it has so many health benefits, not only physically, but like I said, mentally, spiritually. But as far as continuing my training these days, unfortunately, no. I had to sort of put it to the side for now, because back when I was training pretty consistently, because that was my main focus and I made it such a priority and I put a lot of time and effort and energy into it, as a result, making music sort of took a seat on the sidelines. So just for me personally, I've found it very challenging to find that balance of being able to do both simultaneously. Not saying that it can't be done, but I'm still trying to find that balance of doing both. But in the future, I would love to, I'll always continue to keep martial arts a part of my life in some capacity, and I would love to get back into it. There are, you know, gyms out here for kickboxing and Muay Thai and stuff like that, or even just boxing period, that I'd love to join and keep up training at some level. But as far as right now, music is like my main priority, so I'm just trying to go 110%, stay focused on that, and give that as much time and effort and energy as I can. So But great question. Thank you. All right. So for our next question, favorite scary / horror movies. Again, that is another great question. Thank you to those that asked. Another really hard question to answer because I'm such a film buff and such a horror movie fan. Again, it's hard to pin it down to just like 1, 2, or even 3. But I mean, I love everything as far as, you know, as far back as like the OG black and white Universal stuff, you know, like Bela Lugosi and Claude Rains and the Lon Chaneys and Boris Karloff. I mean, even before that, you know, like Nosferatu and the original Phantom of the Opera. Stuff that they make nowadays, horror has changed so much as a genre, so it's so vast and so diverse nowadays. But as far as all-time favorite horror movies goes, my top 3 I'd probably have to pick are Bram Stoker's Dracula, Gary Oldman and Winona Ryder. That probably is my favorite horror movie of all time. It's just so good. The effects in it are so great. It still holds up. The acting is incredible. I try to watch it every year for Halloween. Sometimes I'll just watch it, you know, just because I love it so much. So definitely Dracula. Another one I'd definitely have to say John Carpenter's The Thing with Kurt Russell. Again, great effects, the acting, the story, just incredible. Classic 80s sci-fi movie. Can't go wrong with that. And then lastly, I'd have to say the original Nightmare on Elm Street. I've watched so much, you know, behind the scenes and the making of and everything when it comes to Wes Craven and especially the Nightmare on Elm Street series. But nothing beats the original. What they did with the original is it was so ahead of its time as far as concept and effects goes, and Robert Englund is amazing. I love Heather Langenkamp to death. And Wes Craven, of course, is a genius. So, yeah, I definitely have to say those 3. So, great question. Thank you for asking. All right, so moving on to our next question. Would I ever do a TikTok live Q&A? That is a great question. Honestly, it just depends on the response I get to doing this kind of video. I would love to go on a TikTok live or an Instagram or Facebook live or even a YouTube live and do that. That would be awesome. But again, it just depends on the response and the demand. So if you guys want to see me do something like that, you know, let me know. Give me some feedback. Leave a comment or reach out to me. Send me messages or, you know, whatever. Say, yeah, we want to see you do a Q&A live, or, you know, go live on TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is. But yeah, I would love to do it. I'm still learning this whole social media sort of, you know, hustle. But yeah, I would love to do that. That's a great question. So thank you for asking. All right, moving on to the next question. This is a great question as well. So thank you for asking. Favorite pizza topping? You know, it's funny because I don't eat pork, so I always get shit from like my family and stuff. They're, you know, if pizza is on the menu or whatever, and you know, usually if it's like, if they order sausage or pepperoni or whatever, ham and stuff, I'll usually have to just kind of pick it off or whatever if those are my only choices. And they'll be like, so what do you eat then when you order pizza? Like just cheese? Or so I mean, if I'm just out and about, you know, at a pizza shop or something like that, and they're doing by the slice, then yeah, you know, you can't go wrong with just a classic cheese slice. Get a side of ranch, you know, I love it. But if I'm ordering for myself like a full pizza, then my go-to, if it's available, is always barbecue chicken. That's probably my favorite pizza topping. I love anything barbecue chicken. You know, close second, if I can't do barbecue chicken, then even like buffalo chicken is great. But also, I just love a traditional veggie pizza. You know, that's always great too. Can't go wrong with that. A little bit of hot sauce on my pizza, and I'm a happy camper. So, thank you for the question. That is a great question. Thank you. All right, so moving on to the next question. What is the most unexpected source of inspiration? Another great question. Thank you for asking. This might be a surprising answer, or kind of like a, you know, super obvious or an unexpected answer or whatever, but the most unexpected source of inspiration for me personally is literally anything and everything. When you first start out making music and writing music, of course you hear a lot from your favorite artists that you kind of idolize or whatever. You hear a lot like, well, you want to write from your own personal life experience, or stuff that you've gone through, or maybe write about something that other people have gone through or that can relate to. So you're constantly in this mind state of trying to study life experiences and trying to figure out, well, how can I put those into a musical sort of form. But for me, I've found over the years, just from doing this for so long, that eventually, and thankfully I've never really suffered from like writer's block. I always have something to write about. I mean, for any artists out there listening, if you guys do struggle with writer's block, that is literally something you can write about. Struggling with writer's block, you can write about that. So, there's literally always something you can find to write about. But for me personally, I'm always pleasantly surprised when I'm inspired by something as random as like the waitress pouring coffee at the diner, me taking my dog for a walk down the street, or a movie that I saw, or a comic book that I read. Like I literally get inspiration from literally the most unexpected places. So that's literally where it comes from, is literally anything and everywhere. I've sort of learned to open my filter to just kind of being ready to absorb any type of inspiration, no matter where you're at, no matter what time of day. So for me personally, I can literally be inspired by anything and everything. That's to me what is most unexpected. But that is a great question. Thank you for asking. What's up, guys? If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, subscribe to the channel, turn on all notifications, and stay tuned for the next one. Peace.